All right, so the specialization that we're talking about today is Frostfire. It says Frostfire mages harness a fusion of fire and ice magic to burn and freeze their enemies. Their elemental magic empowers them, enabling devastating combinations of spellcasting, increasing their output by manipulating temperatures. Okay, I think I might actually have someone really awesome to talk about this with. So yeah, anyways, we're merging the temperatures, we're manipulating that stuff. It's going to be frost and fire. A little awkward though with the naming convention, Frostfire, Fire Mage, Frostfire, Frost Mage. I think that's a little strange how that rolls out, but anyways. Okay. So Frostfire Mastery is our first one, and these are always the most important ones to kind of talk about because they kind of inform the entire rest of the tree. Kind of everything hinges on this first talent up here. So Frostfire Mastery is your damaging fire spells generate 1 stack of fire mastery, frost spells generate 1 stack of frost mastery. So we have something called mastery for each one that we are building stacks on. Fire mastery increases your haste by 1%, and frost mastery increases your mastery by 1% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 8 times. Adding stacks does not refresh duration. So if you do a global every single time for one of the fire types, you're going to have potentially 8% of whatever that stat is versus 8% of the other stat, or maybe a mix of the two. That's interesting. Okay. All right. So on the left-hand column, start over here. So we have a choice node between Imbued Warding and Meltdown. Imbued Warding, Fire, Blazing Barrier, also casts Ice Barrier at 25% effectiveness. This also affects your Mass Barrier. Okay, interesting. And then for Frost, it is Ice Barrier, also casts Blazing Barrier. So you're just getting 25% more shield, and you're getting the benefits of the shield. But since neither of these shields really have that big of a benefit in terms of what they actually do for you, like in a raid setting or like a Mythic Plus setting, they're not Precise Barrier. They're not the Arcane one. The Arcane one would actually be super worthwhile to have this on because you would get the reduction on the duration of debuffs. You'd get the magic damage taken reduction. That's not going to be the case. The other option is Meltdown. You melt slightly out of your Ice Block and Ice Cold, allowing you to move slowly during Ice Block and increasing your movement speed over time. Ice Block and Ice Cold trigger a Blast Wave when they end. So you're basically weighing the option between having 25% more Absorb Shield versus having a slight mobility increase. And then the Blast Wave, which I feel like that in PvP is going to be really nuts. I mean, I definitely would just take Imbued Warding, just based on what I can see here, but maybe the speed increase is really huge. I don't know. Maybe it's worth it. Could be situational. Okay, and then we have Isothermic Core. Comet Storm now calls down a meteor at 100% effectiveness on your target's location. Holy shit, okay. So Meteor is actually not flagged as a spell that removes Shatter for Frost. So this is actually insane for Frost because this means that you're going to have a Meteor hitting at 100% effectiveness at your target's location. That's going to be shattering due to Winter's Chill on your Flurry, which means that if you use Comet Storm the way you should, which is you Flurry and then you Comet Storm during the Flurry, you're going to get a lot more value out of that Meteor than you did previously. And it says Meteor also calls down the Comet Storm at 150% effectiveness on your target. Okay, so for Fire, it's like kind of minimal. I mean, it's just more damage on your Meteor. That's nice. It's a nice little buff to Meteor. We like Meteor. Meteor's a fun talent. But the implication here is that you're also increasing the value of the already super overpowered Fire talent that we take Living Bomb for, even in single target Firefall, but maybe the talents will change. Okay. Moving on from there, we have Excess Frost. So for Fire, reaching maximum stacks of Frost Mastery causes your next Phoenix Flame to also cast Ice Nova at 200% effectiveness. When you consume excess Frost, the cooldown of Meteor is reduced. Oh, okay. And then we also have Frost. Reaching maximum stacks of Frost Mastery causes your next Flurry to also cast Ice Nova at 200% effectiveness. Same spell. Interesting. Nice little cooldown reduction on your Comet Storm. Nice little cooldown reduction on your Meteor. We'll talk about Frostfire Bolt next. So this is obviously the most important part of this, right? This is the key component. So Frostfire Bolt replaces Frostbolt and replaces Fireball. So both specs are going to be using the same builder. Launches a bolt of Frostfire at the enemy, dealing Frostfire damage, slowing movement by 50%, causing additional Frostfire damage over 8 seconds. Frostfire Bolt generates a stack of both Frost and Fire Mastery. So yeah, this is going to be the primary way that you get your Frost stacks then as a Fire Mage, and it's going to be how you get your Fire stacks as a Frost Mage. You're going to be casting like Frostfire Bolt a lot, but it won't be like the only thing you're casting. It's also a 2-second cast. What is the cast time on Fireball? What's the cast time on Fireball? 2.25 seconds. Okay, so it's slightly shorter than Fireball, actually. And then we have a choice node. Severe temperatures versus thermal conditioning. Frostfire Bolt's cast time is reduced by 10%. Or we have casting Frost or Fire spells increases the damage of your next Frostfire Bolt by 6%, stacking up to 5 times. Okay. So like for fire, I could see in combustion where you don't really cast your Frostfire bolt a lot because you're going to be mainly doing like Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Phoenix Flames, all that stuff. You would probably end up building up a really nice fatty Frostfire bolt. And then at 5 stacks, I mean, that's 30% increase, right? So that's a pretty nice little damage increase. Or you could just have reduced cast time. Yeah, this is interesting. I would need to know how much damage this spell actually does to know how good Severe Temperatures is. It's going to depend on the tuning on Frostfire Bolt as to which one of these is going to be better, but I could see it situationally being either or. So there's 2 considerations. Number 1 is the total time you spend using your builder. Number 2 is the damage coefficient of your builder. And if it ends up being a better damage per execute time if you have higher stacks to the point where you would actually want to prioritize building stacks and using that as part of your core rotation. But this is interesting. We'll have to see more. Okay, so Frostfire Empowerment. Your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to activate Frostfire Empowerment, causing your next Frostfire bolt to always critically strike. Okay, another component kind of helping severe temperatures here. Always critically strike, it's spelling for 80% of its damage to nearby enemies and be instant cast. Okay, so that also makes the cast time reduced here as well. The only thing that actually kind of synergizes here with thermal conditioning is with thermal conditioning, you should have more casts. Therefore, you'll have more, on average, chances to have this become empowered. So I could still see it going either way. Would need to see the numbers. Okay, and then over here, Elemental Affinity. So the cooldown of Frost spells is reduced by 10%. The cooldown of Fire spells is reduced by 30%. I feel like Fire gets like a way better deal on this one. Because like having your Frost spells reduced is sick, because that means your Ice block is reduced. That means your, I believe Ice Flows is also considered a Frost spell. It is Frost. Okay, so that would actually reduce the cooldown of your Ice Flows too. So that just means more cast while casting. Fire's already extremely mobile, and that could really make Ice Flows like even better. And then the other option is, well, before we get too excited about Elemental Affinity, let's talk about Flame and Frost here. Okay, Cauterize resets the cooldown of your Frost spells with a base cooldown shorter than 4 minutes when it activates. Wait, base cooldown shorter than 4 minutes. So it would not affect Ice block. And then for Frost, you have Cold Snap additionally resets the cooldown on your Fire spells. Okay, that is crazy. I think I'd still probably go with cooldown reduction though. Frostfire Infusion. Your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to trigger additional bolt of Frostfire, dealing Frostfire damage. The effect generates Frostfire Mastery when active. Okay, so all of your spells have a chance to just shoot off a bolt of Frostfire. Okay, that is interesting. So that means you're going to passively generate stacks even if you are not casting Frostfire Bolt, which means that this one over here actually gains a lot of value compared to Thermal Conditioning, because you're going to be randomly getting, assuming that this works with severe temperatures, you're going to be randomly getting increased damage, and then you're going to be spending it. That way you don't cap out at 5. This is actually, this one seems interesting. I like this one. This is cool. Seems better in the PvP setting. Yeah, whole tree seems like it's almost like the PvP talent tree. Yeah, I mean, kind of. I think good talents, I think a hallmark of like a good hero talent tree so far would be like talents that seem relevant in PvP and PvE. So I think that's okay. And I think that's the design intent as well. Excess Fire. So Fire. Reaching maximum stacks of Fire Mastery causes your next Fire Blast to apply Living Bomb at 150% effectiveness. When this Living Bomb explodes, reduce the cooldown of Phoenix Flame by 10 seconds. When the Living Bomb explodes, you reduce your cooldown on Phoenix Flame, versus when the Living Bomb explodes, you gain a Brain Freeze. That sounds way better. The proc rate on this is probably going to be about once per 12 seconds. Frostfire Empowerment gives you maximum benefit of Frostfire Mastery and refreshes its duration. Your Frost and Fire spells have a chance to activate Frostfire Empowerment, causing your next Frostfire Bolt to always critically strike, explode for 80% of its damage to nearby allies, and be instant cast. So whenever this procs, you get the maximum benefit of Frostfire Mastery, and it refreshes duration. Activating Combustion or Icy Veins grants you Frostfire Empowerment. Okay, so whenever you press your Combustion, your Fireball will be instant cast. I mean, with the current design, you would still press Combustion while you're casting, and then you would finish your cast with a Hot Streak, so you'd have both of those crit at the same time, and then return a Hot Streak, and then you'd Pyroblast again. But then right after that, you would press Frostfire Bolt as like your next spell, and that's gonna, well, it'll crit, but you know, you're gonna be guaranteed to crit because of Combustion. I think this talent tree is actually pretty solid. Definitely the thing that makes me most excited so far is Isothermic Core, because having the ability to call down a meteor as Frost, like on command during a shatter window with meteor being whitelisted, seems really strong. Why don't you, really quickly, I already said that you are the Wowhead guide writer for Frost Mage. Can you give us just a little bit more of an introduction, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. As you said, I'm currently the Frost Mage writer at Wowhead, and historically, I've been a raider in BDG, Big Dumb Guild, and an analyst for the last expansion for them as well. And I've been playing this game for a very long time. I'm also a simulation craft developer. Spend a lot of time getting Mage working and well in there.
It's funny. I
That's
think.
about it.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's funny. I think most of my Evoker like fans out there who play probably know you from the cast bar too, because you
Oh
are
yeah,
the one who
true.
made the cast bar that we have with like the little red ticks and all that. So yeah, also doing the weak aura stuff. Cool. So like I went over the talents already. I've also kind of scrubbed through the interview, although I didn't really get too much out of that. I'll say like in general, the talents, just to kind of like lay a foundation here. I feel like it's neat. Like I'm not like really super excited by them, but I think in terms of like the hero talents I've seen so far, which I just covered the priest ones, I've also covered the chrono warden ones. These seem like kind of the cooler of the bunch that I've seen so far, but also not really going to change too much, although I could see some interesting aspects with like shattering meteor and stuff like that. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get your take. So scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for these new Frost Mage talents? And I guess what is your favorite thing or your biggest highlight you've seen so far?
I'd say I'd probably give these like an 8 or so. I think they're pretty good. There's some room for improvement and some problems with them, but those can obviously be fixed over time. And I think what I like the most about them is just thematically, there's a lot of like actual procs and visuals in here that you're going to be having where you're actually using both elements. And so it's not like disciplinary command and Shadowlands
Yeah.
where you're using all the schools, but not really. It's just an annoying maintenance buff.
Yeah, I agree. I really so like there's obviously like a lot of questions I have about this tree, kind of like scrubbing through it and looking at like for instance like Frostfire Infusion having the proc chance but also having the instant cast. Really hoping that instant cast doesn't get gobbled up by that proc. But I assume stuff like that will probably get figured out and hashed out during beta. But just like shooting off random extra bolts seems kind of cool. So I think the aesthetic is very strong here, but aside from the aesthetic and I guess like the feeling of it, I feel like it's kind of like you're just kind of getting buffs. I don't really feel like there's too much else going on there. Cool. So, oh, you didn't answer. What's your like most exciting node if you had to just like name one here?
Let's see, that's a difficult one. I guess it doesn't really do that much mechanically, but I really like imbued warding just because if you read the article I wrote for Wowhead, one of the things I wanted was visuals from both barriers in one when you're playing this hero tree.
Yeah.
And so that's just nice to actually see that in there. I'd prefer if they made like new visuals so that if you're a Frostfire mage, then you have like a hint of frost in your barrier and vice versa. But just having both is already a good thing, I think.
With this talent, it's just like 25% more effectiveness, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like we're getting precision barrier on this at all, right? Like, we're not getting like the arcane barrier, which is like the good one that we could potentially get. So,
It
but
does
it's
make
neat.
it compete with that one very much though, I think, just being
Ye-
25% stronger.
Yeah, yeah, 25% stronger and also affecting mass barrier too. I mean, mass barrier is already so strong and adding 25% effectiveness to that's kind of nutty. Also, I feel like Meltdown is funny because I would be way more excited about Meltdown if we didn't have Ice Cold. But like having just a slight movement increase on Ice Cold, it's like, okay, well, in most cases when I'm using Ice Cold, I'm standing still. So that doesn't really do much for me. It's nice, but and then the blast wave is probably going to be out in range, so I probably won't even hit anything with that. In fact, I would probably say that blast wave is going to probably cause more problems than it does good for you. Yeah, obviously, like we're getting this buff. Really happy that they chose haste and mastery, by the way, and not crit, because I was just thinking about like how much of a disaster this would be if one of those
Oh yeah,
buffs
for
was
sure.
crit, since it's fire and frost that we're discussing here. Um, but let's talk about isothermic core. So this is by far the most exciting part of this entire tree, and I saw some chatter before, and I was kind of thinking about this myself. Like obviously, Comet Storm is the way that we use it right now as Frost. Is we are throwing out a flurry so that we have Winter's Chill active. Comet Storm is whitelisted by our Winter's Chill, so it's going to shatter, and that's how we use this spell. And this is now adding on a Meteor at 100% effectiveness, and Meteor is a very hard hitting spell, and that's going to be shattering too. So, what's your take on this node?
Overall, it's I think good. The one thing I don't like about it is it sort of forces you into Comet Storm and Meteor as talents even more than you already might be.
Yeah.
But they're fun to play with in general, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what the actual talents look like, because I was thinking about this too, like Firefall, for instance, right? Like this is such a strong talent for fire that we like literally give away 2 talent points just to reach it
Yeah.
with Living
I would
Bomb
kind of
and
hope this
Convection.
doesn't work with Firefall.
If it does, I mean, Firefall's like pretty much a
Yeah.
lock in. I would be happy with like picking Meteor more, just like natural picking it, just going down the tree and actually selecting it. But also, yeah, it doesn't feel good whenever you have capstones that are already good, that you're already picking all the time, and now you're adding even more incentive to always take that capstone. Kind of feels like you're reducing the ability to even break out of like the dead talent problem that Fire Mage has in the capstone area. So that part's definitely a negative. But I will say the prospect of like getting these meteors for free or these comet storms for free is like really fun. Or like I'm excited by the idea. So also I'm gonna laugh because this is gonna be so funny in PvP. I can
Oh,
just see
yeah.
it now. They're gonna have to do something about the PvP scaling on this thing.
Yeah, probably. It's
Cool.
another good example, though, of like the main thing I was saying about I like about this tree, where it's just like aesthetically, this tree is really good, I think.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's gonna look so cool, right? Because like anytime you throw a comet storm, a giant meteor is gonna drop down with it. Same goes for meteor dropping with like the comet storm. It's gonna look awesome. Oh, it's also gonna be really, really maddening if the tank like moves during your comet storm even more so than it is now.
Yeah.
Can you miss meteor, by the way? I don't know how that works. Like if you proc like a firefall, can you miss it?
Yeah, you can. You'd have to the target would have to be moving pretty fast, but it could miss.
Yeah, not as bad as comet storm, but okay. Yeah, I mean, either way though, you're gonna have Comet Storm in the mix, so you're gonna still suffer, I guess, even as a Fire Mage if the tank makes a erratic movement there. Okay, so I actually thought this was pretty interesting. So excess Frost, excess Fire, obviously these are mirrored, right? Fire
Yeah.
gets Phoenix Flame, does Ice Nova, and then Frost is getting Flurry, does Ice Nova, and then Fire gets Fire Blast, does Living Bomb. And then Frost gets Living Bomb at 100% effectiveness. This begs the question. Okay, so we have a buff, right? It stacks to 8. It lasts 12 seconds. It does not refresh duration. What we can assume is that the maximum time to reach stacks is probably less than 12 seconds. We probably will spend less than 12 seconds reaching the maximum of these stacks based on what we know, right? Especially since Frostfire Bolt is slightly faster cast than Fireball. Just using like fire as an example. And we're also going to be proccing constant other stuff, right? Now, here's where I'm concerned. This is a really long buff to me based on the design of this because the incentive is to reach max stacks, but it cannot refresh duration. So what? I wonder if they're going to add protection on this so you can't just click it off. Because I
Yeah,
feel
it would
like
be a
you
good
would,
idea, I
because you
think.
would totally like in your cooldowns, you would just click this thing off, especially like double us. Like you would definitely just click this off so that you could get more procs of excess frost, excess fire. Because you're going to be
Especially
getting
with the
both.
like ultimate talent you haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
That would be another case where you cancel it.
Yeah. I haven't even gotten the flash freeze burn, but yeah, another additive. And it will also because you're going to be using your cooldowns too, which
Yeah,
is
well,
always going.
specifically that one just sets you to max stacks. So if you can cancel it, you'll always cancel it before pressing that. If you are like we're already max.
At least in that case, you're not like having a dedicated cancel my stacks macro. You could just like include it in your icy veins or combustion macro. But yeah, I see this as like I really hope that they add that protection that they do on certain spells where you can't get rid of it because that seems to me like maybe a problem. Um, Either way though, so let's assume that you can't abuse it, right? Um, the benefit here, it's hard to quantify, but we're just getting like a lot of extra like little hits, and I guess we could just say like 8% more haste, 8% more mastery. We don't know how much damage coefficient Frostfire is going to have, Frostfire Bolt, but I assume it's going to be somewhat similar to Frostbolt and Fireball, where it's like, if you multiply by like 70%, then maybe it's good, but otherwise it's like kind of small.
Yeah, I think it's intended at least on single target to be our filler spell still.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting though because we also have like the it's going to critically strike and explode like that. Obviously for fire this seems like a lot more interesting because it means you're going to have a guaranteed heating up or hot streak from it. Whereas for frost it's like okay, well you wouldn't have to shatter it if you proc that, right? Like that's really the only thing I could see when it comes to gameplay. It seems like overall though, and they even kind of said this in the interview, they aren't really wanting you to change how you play based on these talents. This is kind of just like a cherry on top, I guess.
Yeah, I think the only awkward thing for Frost about Frostfire empowerment is that, like, normally in your rotation, you cast Frostbolt and then Flurry, so that you're benefiting from like all three opportunities you have to benefit
Yeah,
from Winter's Shell. And if your Frostbolt were instant cast, like Frostfire Bolt will be in this case, unless you have Glacial Spike ready, there's no way to get benefit from that first part of Winter's Shell, which
exactly.
feels kind of bad. Although numerically, I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing. It's just a playstyle change a little bit.
Yeah, kind of similar to it could also I think catch you off guard as fire too in certain cases, especially if you have like a lot of haste because you'd run into the situation kind of like where whenever you're above 100% haste and you like use scorch, you have like too much haste and then it kind of like screws up having both your spells hit at the same time and give you like a hot streak back. So kind of a similar problem. Both specs kind of
Mhm.
suffer from this like travel time issue where you have to have your spells kind of hitting in a certain cadence to get like your crits back and all that. I guess it's less of an issue for fire, but still somewhat there. But yeah, no, kind of interesting design decision. Not really sure how I feel about it. 80% of its damage to nearby enemies sounds fun, but I don't know how much damage it does in the first place, so who cares? But
The main
also,
reason I think it's good to have this talent, at least in some form, is if you think about AoE situations for
mhm,
Fire and Frost. It's like Fire, you could play an Ignite build and you'd be casting Fireball or Frostfire Bolt. But for a Flame Strike build or for Frost, you don't want to press Frostbolt or
right.
Fireball. And so, how do you even get the other like school stacks if on AoE with this tree?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think this also does like definitely lend itself more to the Ignite build too, just like looking overall at the talents. But no, 100%. Because it's Frost, yeah, I mean, you're mainly going to be throwing out Frozen Orbs, Blizzards, using Comet Storms. I guess those would proc like Meteors, but still, that's like way less common than just like using your builder.
Yeah, when you do get Frostfire Empowerment, you will press the button as Frost, but you're not going to be getting very many fire stacks, I don't think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so
It
that feels a
is,
little bad just because Excess Fire and Excess Frost are kind of at least a bit geared towards AoE because they cast an AoE spell. So it's a little weird that you're sort of, as Fire, not really generating Frost stacks, and as Frost, not really generating Fire stacks on AoE.
mhm. But then on the flip side, it's kind of nice because it would mean an AoE pretty much like you have this filler spell that's like usually going to be up, right? Because like if you aren't pressing it, it would be pretty much always up, and you could just have like an instant caster to throw out there. I don't know. I like the idea of like having more instant cast, but I also feel like fire specifically like has like so many instant casts already. Like so much of the
Yeah.
rotation is already just instant cast. If you don't even account for like having like ice flows or shimmer, um, you're talking about like over 60-70% of your spells are instant casts that you're pressing normally. So like, I don't know, you're closely approaching like a BM situation. But yeah, pretty interesting. Definitely will be one of those things we have to kind of like look at once we get our hands on it. Moving on to another topic here. So the choice node elemental affinity versus flame and frost. So I was looking over this one and it definitely seemed interesting to me, the difference here. I mean, obviously, like we don't know what all spells Frost is going to have access to their fire right now, aside from like what we have as current talents. We can just make assumptions. But whenever I was looking at Flame and Frost, like Cauterize resetting the cooldown of your Frost spells, I was thinking like Ice Flows is totally a Frost spell. So that would
Yeah.
refresh Ice Flows. Obviously, it wouldn't do Ice Block because Ice Block is too long for it. The base duration is 4 minutes. But yeah, I don't know. This one's interesting. I definitely feel like Frost is getting kind of like the short end of the stick here, unless you can get a Cauterize reset, which they don't have access to Cauterize as far as we know.
I don't completely disagree that, or I don't completely agree there because Cold Snap resetting the fire spells, if you're doing like a Mythic Plus dungeon or a raid where you need lots of AoE stops and you
Yeah,
have Blast Wave and Dragon's Breath, you can do like 4 stops yourself, which
that's a good
is
point.
very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So that would be really great. But then using your like defensive for your like stops, I guess it kind of feels bad. But in a way, you can kind of already do this with like shifting power too. Like you can have more than one interrupt because you could just interrupt shifting power, interrupt again. So
Yeah.
I guess it kind of like falls in line with that. But obviously, if you go elemental affinity instead as fire, you're just going to get 10% more ice flows because you're reducing the cooldown on all your frost spells. I assume that one's flagged
Yeah.
as frost.
10% more ice block too, which is
10%
nice.
more ice block. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. And then I don't know how they're going to flag it, but it also could potentially work with your barriers too. I mean, It says that Blazing Barrier also casts it. I don't know how they're going to like do this on the back end, but I could see since it's doing both, maybe there being some sort of tie-in. Who knows? Um,
Maybe, yeah.
but yeah, it definitely really interesting. As Frost 2, like having the cooldown reduction on fire spells just be a flat 30%. That sounds to me like if I was doing dungeons, like obviously having cold snap situationally, like being able to get the extra stops out like in the moment is really, really nice. Giving up the defensiveness for it, not so nice. But just having like 30% more of it is just like really strong too. Since you already have cooldown reduction talents for like Dragon's Breath, for instance, right?
Yeah, definitely. The cold snap part I more see as being like if you're like in a raid or some pack is really hard and you just want to completely solo it yourself and not have to worry about your group. That's when you'd use the cold snap option, I think.
Yeah, just think about P2 on Ferric, right? Like
Yeah,
obviously everyone
exactly.
has engineering belts anyways, but like Blast Wave flings mobs really far, and you could do a Blast Wave and then immediately cold snap Blast Wave again. Pretty cool. So I mean that one's actually pretty interesting. It's not really damage oriented at all, but I think it's still pretty exciting. I was trying to think if there was anything that would like be a damage component to this, but I guess we'll have to wait and see like what ends up on the talent tree. Also, Living Bomb being like as part of Excess Fire, that could proc for Frost without them actually having access to the talent. But since the other one is Ice Nova, I feel like maybe we'll see some changes in the talent tree. At least I hope we'll see some changes.
Maybe I will see. Currently, I think that's just a proc, but
Yeah. Cool. And then so moving on from there, yeah, so we already talked about the middle column here, Frostfire Empowerment. Frostfire Infusion, having a chance to trigger additional Frostfire Bolt. I mean, this is just cool. It's just like added flavor, just flinging out the Frostfire Bolts. I imagine they'll just shoot out kind of like an icicle. But aesthetically, like Frostfire looks cool, and this one's actually pretty exciting to me, even though it doesn't really change anything. It is nice. I'd be curious to know if this interacts with like heating up and hot streak at all. But yeah, kind of neat.
I would guess it doesn't interact with anything, and it's just completely different from the regular Frostfire Bolt.
I
But
hope
we'll
so.
see.
Yeah, I hope so, because that'd be really like we were talking about before. If it munched your Frostfire Empowerment, that'd be really annoying. Or if it like munched a Winter's Chill, or like did something else like that, it would definitely make more sense if it was like Icicle kind of
I think that's
situation
probably just meant as a way, especially like in AoE, like I was talking about, to help you
to
get more
generate
stacks
stacks.
of the other school, like more reliably. But we'll have
Yeah,
to see what the proc, like the RNG type and everything is on that.
like we don't know their intent, but I can only assume that like their intent, since they have the does not refresh duration and it lasts 12 seconds and 8 stacks maximum. I'm assuming that they're probably thinking behind the scenes like this is how much on average you should be reaching in 12 seconds. At least that's like my my impression of it. But yeah, who knows what the proc rates will end up being. Um,
Yeah, it's potentially going to make haste a really important stat for both specs, just so that you can get to max stacks more reliably, because
mhm.
you get so many bonuses if you are consistently hitting max stacks.
Yeah, I mean haste would literally give you more haste, right? So it's like a
Yeah, especially for Frost with the one in the bottom right. I forgot what it's called, but excess fire. Excess fire is really good for Frost, and so anything you can do to get more fire stacks, like getting
oh
more
yeah.
haste, is
Yeah,
I think very important rotationally.
yeah, we didn't talk about this, but I wanted to bring this up too. Phoenix Flame reduction by 10 seconds. I'm like, okay, cool. But but Living Bomb giving you brain freeze after it explodes. Now that is sick. Because
Yeah.
that just means so much more brain freeze procs that you're going to be getting as Frost. And that it definitely feels like this might even change some of the logic if you're playing Glacial Spike, if you're just getting like a lot more brain freezes. It definitely could just like change little things about the rotation. I think like having more brain freeze is always good. Although it'll be interesting to see like what this ends up playing like. We'll have to actually see it in person. But maybe it'll help a little bit too with like the start of expansion woes. I mean, you know how it is. Like whenever a new expansion comes out and you're playing mage, it just kind of feels bad to like not have the secondary stats where they need to be. Especially
Yep.
like fire, because you got like no crit, and then you're like trying to put everything into haste, and even then like your haste is still pretty low, and you just kind of feel like obviously it's not gonna like have the effects and damage that people meme about, like, oh well, mage scale's really high as the patch goes on. It's not really that. It's more so like the feeling of the spec just kind of feels off. At least that's just me.
Hmm.
So hopefully it helps in that regard. They said, I don't know if you caught this before, but they said that they want to shoot for all of the hero talents being like 25% damage increase. So all of them should be roughly about that number.
I see. That's good to know. I didn't pay attention to that before.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll definitely be interested to see. I think definitely the one that's making bigger waves right now is just the the priest one with all the
The
PI
external
shenanigans.
tree.
Yeah, that sounds like a kind of a nightmare. But anyways, yeah, thanks for chat. Any closing words?
Uh, I don't think so. I guess I'd want to re-highlight the fact that my one big concern with this tree is how it interacts with AoE right now, since
Yeah.
Frostfire Bolt is a single target spell and is everything in the tree is very like tied to Frostfire Bolt being a spell you actually press.
Yeah, that's very true. At least Fire has a variant where like you don't really worry about that in AoE, but
Yeah.
definitely concerning for Frost. Yeah, 100%.
It is good for fire though that it does mean that it's kind of, if you think of Frostfire Bolt as Fireball, it's kind of forcing you to press Fireball more on single target rather than trying to like find PF only rotations, for example, where you don't press Fireball, which I think aren't necessarily the healthiest design for the spec.
Do you know if just like a random question, but okay, so Fireball cast time is like slightly longer than 2 seconds, right? And
Hmm.
this one's like 2 second cast. But it's not that big of a difference, but I could see it being like a bigger, I guess, problem potentially. Like once we are doing like temporal warp bloodlust shenanigans.
Yeah, potentially. Oh, actually, you just made me, for some reason, I forgot to mention this, remember something very important, which is Frostfire Bolt going to be snapshotting on cast or on impact? Because
Mm.
for Frost, it kind of has to snapshot on impact, but for Fire, that would make it play a bit differently, like around combustion, for example.
Yeah, it'd be like Phoenix Flame where you'd like be
Yeah.
a little careful about using it late. Interesting.
Or you could do something like Frostfire Bolt Meteor and then wait a moment and then combust. So Frost, when you're like doing Frostbolt Flurry, for example, because Frostbolt snapshots on impact, Flurry has time to get to the target and apply Winter's Chill, so that it can
Right.
then benefit from Shatter.
Ah, that makes
Whereas if it
sense.
snapshot on cast for Frostfire Bolt, you wouldn't. It would be when you finish the cast is Winter's Chill on the target rather than when it hits, which would feel much weirder.
Yeah, totally. Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yep. Well, it could potentially work both ways too, but yeah, it's definitely something to think about. Yeah. Yeah, let's do another talk once we get more information, but appreciate you again.
Yep.
All right,
Thanks
have a
for
good
having
one.
me.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Awesome. So that again was Dorovon. He is the Wowhead guide writer for Frost Mage, and also prolific author of Weak Auras, does log stuff, APL stuff, Simcraft, does all the big brain stuff, also played in BDGG. Appreciate his opinions all the time. I don't know, he didn't plug anything, but you can go, I think if you just search on Twitch for Dorvan, you should be able to find something. I don't know if he streams much, but either way, always appreciate his time. Okay, so yeah, I mean, what else is there to say about this spec? I mean, it really doesn't, the substance isn't really there for us yet. Definitely bringing up a lot of questions, but I think in terms of the hero towns we've seen so far, probably the least amount of questions I've had by at least just kind of looking at it, getting a feel for it. I agree that there's probably going to be some areas where this is going to feel weird, especially like for Frost and AoE. Could be a situation where maybe you play them Raid, maybe you don't play Mythic Plus. I could see that, right? We do have access to 2 different hero talents for each spec. Each spec has 2. So there could be a situation where you may play one strictly Raid and one strictly Mythic Plus. In fact, I would go so far as to say that that's probably going to be the default for most classes. Like, just knowing how these things always pan out, Blizzard has said that they're shooting for 25% increase on your class's throughput through the talents, but you'll have to wait and see where it actually ends up. We don't know where the damage is going to end up being for this stuff. So we'll have to just wait and see. But anyways, yeah, so I'll just wrap it up. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'm going to get back to work, but I will see y'all in the next one. All right, bye everyone.